Well, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, veterans ages 18 to 24 have an unemployment rate of over 29%, which is close to double that of young people in the same age group that did not serve. That's why, here in Oklahoma, a coordinated effort is underway to help these young men and women who have served our country so proudly re-enter the civilian workforce. In today's show, we'll talk to everyone from our governor to the state's Secretary of Military and Veteran Affairs about the work underway in Oklahoma. But before we do that, here is some background. It was a poignant homecoming as soldiers from the 45th Infantry Combat Brigade returned home. Families reunited and lives interrupted, returning to normalcy. Yet once the tears of joy dry, many of these soldiers face a new challenge of finding work.
This was a Vietnamese pith helmet.
Retired Major General Lee Baxter spent more than 3 decades on active duty and says it's often not easy for soldiers to transition back into civilian life.
For the individual returnee, is he's got to understand and feel good about his own future and what he's going to do. And for a lot of Oklahoma veterans, that's an uncertain period. And as they return, particularly now, the National Guard, a lot of these young men and women, need that education and need the security that comes with finding themselves in a new professional pattern and a new job.
Estimates are as many as 1/3 of Oklahomans returning from service are now looking for work. Some unemployed, but others underemployed.
We have 10,000 unemployed vets in Oklahoma. And I think it's our job, after they've defended our freedom and put their lives on the line, to find these young men and young women gainful employment. And I'm not talking about flipping hamburgers or waiting on tables. I'm talking about jobs that are very beneficial to them and to the economy.
Which is why educators like CareerTech's Phil Birkenbile are combining forces with state and military leaders to ensure returning veterans will win the battle of finding a career now that they're home. What type of skills do these veterans already bring with them?
Well, skills are one thing, values and attitude is another, and I just mentioned that one first. When you hire a veteran, you're hiring a guy that's used to coming to work on time, knows the value of hard work, he is drug-free, he's probably had a significant amount of leadership experience, even as a young enlisted man or a young officer. He's had an awful broad level of experience. So he or she is a good person to begin with, and the kind of person you're going to want to hire, And the skill sets they bring are very, very diverse. But then they have many specific skills that are often masked by military terminology or military occupational specialty. And I always use a field artillery cannoneer from Fort Sill, we think of as firing a howitzer and doing all that sort of thing. But in fact, he's very capable and very experienced and trained in long-haul trucking and hazardous long-haul trucking. Probably been driving semi-trailers of hazardous cargo, ammunition across Afghanistan and Iraq for the last year or so. So it's a very easy transition for him into driving trucks that have hazardous material in the civilian sector. And our challenge is to translate those skills to a civilian company's understanding of what's needed and get them their certification earlier and give them credit for what they've done, not necessarily what it's been called.
That's because certain civilian certifications do not recognize the skills gained during military service.
You've had somebody working overseas in Afghanistan or Iraq on jet engines or helicopter engines that comes back, and instead of giving him credit for all that service he had and all the skills he's learned, the federal government, FAA, makes him take almost all of that over again to get that certification. And we're trying to find ways to short circuit that, not take away any of the safety out of it, but give him credit for what he's done and what he's learned, and put him on the right job, the right track at the right time.
When the soldier's leaving the military, he's going to want to go to work. He knows he's got a skill set. He knows he's capable of driving long-haul trucks in the energy business. He knows that. He's done that. He's done that in hazardous material. And oh, by the way, we need 900 of those today in Oklahoma. Well, unless this young man can get out of the service, get quickly trained and certified, and go to work in Oklahoma, he'll go to North Dakota, or he'll go to Texas or some other state that'll employ him more quickly and move him through the wickets he needs to get through more quickly. So this is not altogether about veterans. I mean, it's also about Oklahoma and our need for skilled people in the energy industry and in other industries. And Devon and Chesapeake and Sandridge and all these folks have real requirements for these kinds of people. We just need to make sure that we're able to convince those energy companies that these young men and women have the right skill sets. And it's a matter of translating those to terms and credentials that these companies understand. And if we're not able to do that, the kids will go where the jobs are, and they'll leave Oklahoma even if they'd prefer to stay.
And while helping veterans find a civilian career path is good for our state's economy, according to Air Force Brigadier General Ben Robinson, continued high unemployment among our veterans could in the long run threaten our national security.
When a young person joins the military, whether that be any one of the services, young man, young lady, they're told something by their recruiter that we intend to turn into a commitment. And that is that they're going to learn a great skill, they're going to learn responsibility, they're going to learn a work ethic as part of their military service. Now on the other end of their military service, how do they convert that work ethic, that sense of responsibility, the fact that they've lived in a drug-free culture, a culture that demands physical capability and a sense of responsibility, how do they convert that into a civilian job? So we're going to set up a process that captures that skill, that culture, that sense of responsibility, that culture that they've lived, and turn it into great opportunities for them to find not just a job, but we want to put them on a career path. And the employers understand that that's a great opportunity for them to get an outstanding employee for their company.
And I think it's important to note here that even entering into military service is not a particularly easy thing to do these days.
It is not a very easy thing to do. In fact, we have some statistics that say that only about 25% of America's young people are qualified either academically or physically or with a drug issue that can even qualify for military service. So that cuts it down. If you're a young person and you're thinking about going in the military and you do have the academic background and the physical background and you've lived a drug-free life, and there's only 25% of you, and we don't show that we're committed to helping you make that transition back into the civilian world, that's an issue of national security.
Honoring a promise to those that have served so honorably. So while we can all agree that helping veterans find work is good for more than just the veterans, like most things, the hard part is in the details. This isn't the first time we've had returning servicemen or even high unemployment among returning veterans. So how do we make this time different? Well, we'll try to answer that when we return.